Good morning, good afternoon, all speakers and participants. Welcome to the conference on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, Rcep, a new paradigm in Asia's trading architecture. My name is Sin-Young Park. I'm Director of the Regional Cooperation Integration and Economics Research and Regional Cooperation Department of ADB. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to this conference. Rcep presents an important milestone for Asia and the world beyond the Rcep 15 members. It is a key step towards strengthening regional cooperation integration and promoting trade and supply chain linkages in the midst of recovery from the COVID. Let me introduce our Chief Economist for a welcome remark. Our Chief Economist and Director General, Albert Park, is a Chief Spokesperson on economics and development trends and leads the production of ADB's flagship knowledge products and support the regional cooperation fora. He has more than 2 decades of experience as a development economist, a well-known expert on the economy of the People's Republic of China. He has directed a number of large-scale research projects in the country. He has also served as an international consultant for the World Bank and a member of steering committee for the Asia Pacific Research University's Population Aging Hub. He also worked on a broad range of development issues, including poverty and inequality, intergenerational mobility, microfinance, migration and labor market, the future of work, and foreign investment. So without further ado, I would like to turn the floor for Albert to give and welcome. Albert?
Thank you. Thank you, Sin-Young. It's really a great pleasure to welcome everybody today to this conference on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. With Asia intent on staying on the path of economic recovery in 2022, we really believe that the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or Rcep, can be a very timely tool to foster regional integration and economic growth. Rcep partners Southeast Asian nations with Australia, the People's Republic of China, Japan, New Zealand, and the Republic of Korea, and has great potential to strengthen manufacturing supply chains, raise productivity, and increase wages and employment. Rcep was conceptualized in November of 2012 to attain a comprehensive and mutually beneficial economic partnership agreement. After 8 years of negotiations, Rcep was signed on November 15th, 2020. And I really want to take this opportunity to congratulate Asean for successfully leading the negotiation of the agreement and all of the people who contributed to the final agreement, managing differences across participating countries, and finally achieving the milestone of implementing the agreement starting January 1st of this year. At the same time, it's certainly not time to relax our efforts. Rcep does not supersede existing free trade agreements, and we need to work together to make sure it delivers on greater liberalization and economic cooperation to generate expected long-term economic gains. The report that we're launching today helps provide a better understanding of Rcep's potential for benefits and value added over existing agreements around traditional issues of trade and investment liberalization and newer issues of regulatory coherence in building a better environment for business. The report covers all of the Rcep chapters and shows that the agreement presents valuable opportunities to deepen regional economic integration. Critically important are the agreement's built-in provisions and economic and technical cooperation measures that make it possible to expand Rcep's depth and coverage in the future. And as we know, Rcep also welcomes applications from new member countries. The ADB has been committed for many years in promoting regional economic integration as a way to further economic prosperity in the region. The analytical research that has been conducted by ADB, including the report launched today, another technical study on product-specific rules of origin launched last Friday, are really only the first step in providing Rcep members with deeper insights into the policy options that can unlock new opportunities. We fully intend to continue working with national governments to help them consider and turn these options into effective strategies for the successful implementation of Rcep in the future. In today's conference, we have a diversity of participants, government officials from Rcep member countries, representatives from international organizations, research institutes, academia, and the business community, who will share and deliberate on priority areas where domestic challenges remain and further intergovernmental work is needed to make the agreement more attractive to final users, namely firms and investors. The discussions and conclusions will help to orient further research, dissemination, and capacity building activities based on different countries' needs. In the end, we want Rcep to be successful with greater utilization of its provisions by the private sector and the member countries to drive the global economic agenda in a resilient, sustainable, and inclusive manner. So today's event really is the beginning of a conversation that we plan to continue in the years to come. And I hope you will all benefit from listening to today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert. Let me now invite our keynote speakers. We have two distinguished speakers to deliver keynotes today. First, Ms. Trudy Whitbrook. She is currently the State Director in New South Wales State Office of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia. In 2021, Ms. Whitbrook served as charge d'affaires attaché at the Australian Embassy in Brussels. She was previously First Assistant Secretary, Regional Trade Agreements Division, and was the Chief Negotiator for Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. She also led DFAT's work on trade advocacy and outreach. Ms. Whitbrook has extensive trade policy experience in DFAT, including serving as Australia's Deputy Permanent Representative to the World Trade Organization in Geneva, and as a counselor, trade policy in Washington, D.C. during negotiation of the Australia-US Free Trade Agreement. She has also served as a senior staff in the Trade and Agriculture Directorate of the OECD. We also have Mr. Safinder Singh, who is the Deputy Secretary General for Asean Economic Community for 2021-2024. In his capacity as the Deputy Secretary General, he provides strategic advice to the economic integration to the Secretary General of the ASEAN for advancing ASEAN's economic integration agenda, as well as to lead the ASEAN Economic Community Department of the ASEAN Secretariat implementing the AEC blueprint by 2025. Before assuming this role, he was the Assistant Chief Executive Officer, Trade Connectivity and Business Services at the Enterprise Singapore, with over 27 years of experience in holding a variety of local, regional, global management positions across the region. He was instrumental in strengthening Singapore's role as trading hub in Asia, as well as driving digitalization efforts in Singapore during the COVID-19 pandemic. So let me first invite Ms. Trudy Whitbrook. Trudy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to the ADB for inviting me to speak today. And I want to congratulate you on this report, A New Paradigm into Asia's Trading Architecture. I mean, from an Australian point of view, Rcep is a truly significant agreement. And I say that as someone who has been involved in trade policy and negotiations for almost my entire career. Just to put it in perspective, Rcep countries account for almost a third of the world's population and GDP. There is no other free trade agreement that brings together parties with, on the one hand, the collective economic weight of Asean with the major regional economies of China, Japan, and Korea. And as was mentioned by the previous speaker, there is provision for additional economies to join into the future, which will build the significance even further of this arrangement. For Australia, Rcep brings together in a single economic framework 9 of our top 15 trading partners that together account for nearly 60% of our trade and about 2/3 of our exports. So as I said, for us, it is very significant. It is a modern and comprehensive free trade agreement covering trade in goods, services, investment, economic and technical cooperation, and it creates new rules for electronic commerce, intellectual property, government procurement, competition, and SMEs. So I want to go through in some more detail, if I may, just why this agreement matters so much to Australia and, dare I say it, to all of its members. In a strategic sense, the agreement is very significant. It signals a shared commitment to opening up new trade and investment opportunities, and also support for the rules-based international economic order. And at this time, these are especially important signals given the challenges of COVID-19 and also global trade tensions. We see Rcep as an agreement that will help stimulate growth, strengthen economic integration, and build business confidence in the world's most dynamic region. We also see Rcep as a platform for ongoing dialogue and economic cooperation. We see Rcep as having the potential to act as a forum for ongoing dialogue and cooperation on the range of trade and economic issues affecting this region. Under the Regional Trade for Development Initiative, Australia will provide $24 million to assist ODA-eligible ASEAN member states to implement Rcep commitments and ensure that the full benefits of the agreement are realised. It will support economic recovery from the impact of COVID-19, and we hope strengthen public discourse on trade through effective partnerships, including with non-government and private sectors. In a more commercial sense, we see Rcep as increasing the opportunities for business to access regional value chains. Rcep provides Australian exporters and importers with a single set of rules of origin to access tariff preferences for trade with other Rcep countries. This is really important. It allows producers in other Rcep countries to count Australian inputs towards qualification for tariff preferences when exporting to third countries within Rcep. Previously, this was only available for trade within the ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand free trade area. Movement of goods through ASEAN to North Asia will be easier, as will be using regional distribution hubs because of the regional nature of Rcep's rules and procedures. Rcep also provides improved mechanisms for tackling NTBs, and we know that for business, it is rather less tariffs than it is NTBs that form the real barriers to trade. Rcep's rules in areas such as customs procedures, quarantine, and technical standards, they address non-tariff barriers by promoting greater transparency and cooperation while reaffirming existing WTO rights and obligations. And Rcep also establishes procedures for technical consultations on non-tariff measures that have adverse impacts on trade. Rcep provides a strong platform to expand trade in services throughout the region. It establishes high-quality rules for the supply of services between the parties, including obligations to provide access to foreign service suppliers, what we call market access, to treat local and foreign suppliers equally, and to treat foreign suppliers at least as well as suppliers of any other non-Rcep country. Service suppliers from the Rcep countries will benefit from commitments to enhance the transparency and predictability of domestic regulation affecting trade and services, and this will make a difference for business. Rcep also enhances rules governing financial services, which is the backbone, if you think about it, of ongoing trade and investment. It has enhanced rules on the supply of financial services, which should, as I said, facilitate operations across the Rcep region. There are also high quality rules on telecoms, and they set out a framework of rules to govern the trade in, access to, and the use of telecommunication services all across the region. For example, Rcep countries have committed to allow the portability of mobile telephone numbers and have agreed to cooperate on reasonable international mobile roaming rates, which all of us know is really important to enhance movement of goods, services and people. On the question of people, the cross-border movement of business people is an integral feature of modern business, and under Rcep, business people will benefit from commitments relating to the processing of applications, enhanced transparency requirements for entry and temporary stay in Rcep countries when travelling for business purposes. And I have to say, people movement is often the #1 issue that business people raise in the context of FTAs. There's very useful articles in Rcep on the recognition of professional services in key markets, again, to allow our people to move more seamlessly within a regional economic context. This is a first, actually, for half of the Rcep countries. It provides specific disciplines which address behind the border barriers on the supply of professional services and creates a framework for professional bodies across the region to engage on recognition of qualifications, licenses and registration. Rcep will also provide greater certainty and confidence for investors by locking in existing conditions and capturing future unilateral liberalisation. At the same time, Rcep will reserves the right of parties to regulate in areas of particular sensitivity. Parties have the flexibility to regulate for important public welfare objectives, including public health. Rcep countries have agreed to preserve their right to screen investments in the national interest, as Australia does through our Foreign Investment Review Board process. There are modern provisions on e-commerce that should allow companies and businesses, including Australian businesses, to capitalise on digital trade in the region, which is growing very fast. There are rules that support Australian businesses transferring data across borders, and they limit the scope for governments to impose restrictions, including requirements to localise or store data. Rules promoting the digitisation of trade documentation and the use of electronic signatures and electronic authentication should also help to facilitate cross-border trade. There's also important protections for consumers in the digital environment. Importantly, Rcep also establishes a common set of rules on intellectual property protection and enforcement for the region. The chapter reflects what we consider to be a shared commitment by Rcep parties to effective and balanced intellectual property systems, and these are entirely consistent with Australia's current existing intellectual property regime. The most important thing from our perspective is that businesses can have confidence that their intellectual property rights can be protected and enforced in Rcep markets. This ought to then encourage investment in new ideas and promote the dissemination of information, knowledge and technology. Standardised rules will also help intellectual property transactions, support transparency, and thereby, we hope, lower the costs of doing business. In the area of government procurement, there will be improved transparency and cooperation amongst the Rcep parties on procurements by central governments. And Rcep is the first agreement where ASEAN as a whole, as well as a number of individual Rcep countries, have included rules on government procurement and trade agreement. And I would not underestimate how important that move is. There are also rules on competition, which require parties to maintain rules on competition law and regulation that act against anti-competitive behaviour and ensure independent enforcement. And last but not least, there are important economic capacity building provisions that will support the capability of SMEs in the region to benefit from the agreement. And this is really important since in all of our countries and economies, a bulk of business is undertaken by SMEs. So can I conclude then by saying that, repeating that Rcep is indeed an agreement of deep significance, both economically and strategically. And I want to thank you again for allowing me to speak to you all today. Thank you.
Thank you, Trudy. Well, we'll have the second presentation from Satvinder.
Your Excellencies, distinguished speakers and panelists, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. Greetings from the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta. It's indeed a pleasure for me to be part of this conference this morning and to share some of my views on the Rcep as a new regional trading architecture, the benefits as well as the challenges ahead for us. Ladies and gentlemen, as all of you know, Rcep has come a long way since it was first introduced in 2011 during Indonesia ASEAN Chairmanship. Fast forward a decade later, the Rcep has now entered into force since the 1st of January 2022. Currently, as we speak, the Rcep participating countries are laying the groundwork for the effective, full and inclusive implementation of the agreement. The potential gains of the Rcep are also very well anticipated. The Asian Development Bank estimates that by 2030, Rcep would increase its parties' income by almost 0.6%, adding an amount of $245 billion in annual regional income, but more importantly, creating an additional 2.8 million jobs for the region. In addition, the spillover effect of the Rcep will go beyond the economic boundary of the participating countries. A study by Brookings Institute have projected that Rcep could add up to about almost $209 billion annually to the world economy and another $500 billion annually to global trade by 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, originally proposed as a kind of ASEAN's solution to the noodle bowl effect created by the various ASEAN +1 FTAs, I can tell you that the Rcep have definitely went beyond the mere consolidation of the ASEAN FTAs to catalyze a new trading architecture for the region. Now, this is clearly reflected in the unique approach that's been adopted in establishing Rcep as a comprehensive, inclusive, a forward-looking agreement that's accessible to businesses in and outside the region. Let me paint and elaborate a little bit on this. First, the Rcep is actually one of the most comprehensive, forward-looking and advanced free trade agreements, which represents almost the next generation of FTAs ever led by ASEAN. Not only is it just the largest in terms of market coverage, more importantly, the scope of issues covered under the Rcep is a lot broader compared to any of the ASEAN +1 FTAs at this stage. The Rcep covers, for example, e-commerce, it covers intellectual property, it covers competition, and even government procurement. None of these you will find them in substantive way in any of the ASEAN +1 FTAs. Furthermore, as Rcep also contains a very important, a built-in agenda of issues for further deliberations and also for a general review provision, which will then allow all of the Rcep participating countries to be able to then to improve their level of commitments and even discuss new and emerging issues in the future. Secondly, the inkeeping of the kind of the ASEAN centrality spirit, the Rcep is also one of the most inclusive trade agreements in the world. I can tell you that. It brings, for example, together countries from different levels of development, from the least developed of the ASEAN member states to developing countries, to large and emerging countries, as well as developed nations. Now, in doing so, for example, the implementation flexibilities are crucial for sure not only during negotiation, but this is going to be extremely important, a very important feature during implementation. Now, these include definitely a differentiated implementation timelines, for example, for certain chapters and provisions that could be in trade facilitation or in tariff phase-out periods. I think this kind of flexibilities are uniquely there, embedded in the spirit of the Rcep. Now, mindful of the parties' differentiated levels of economic development, the agreement also contains a standalone chapter on economic and technical cooperation. In short, we call it ECOTEC. Now, this ECOTEC chapter, it is aimed to kind of narrow the development gaps among the parties and to maximize future mutual benefits from the implementation and the utilization of the Rcep. It gives priority to, among other things, way of providing capacity building and technical assistance to developing country partners and more of the least developed country parties. Now, thirdly, I need to share of how Rcep is actually extremely accessible to businesses. Now, notwithstanding all of the lengthy provisions and the text of the agreement, the Rcep provisions actually would benefit not only multinationals, but also small and medium-sized enterprises. Now, this include measures that are streamlining trade rules, measures that are bringing about transparency and consultation provisions. In fact, there are going to be specific chapters on SMEs, specific chapters on e-commerce, and trade facilitation chapters focused on lowering cost and the time for imports and exports. For example, the declaration of origin by the approved exporters and under the Rcep is a lot simpler procedure to process importers' claim for preferential tariff in the post-importation period. Now, fourth, let me touch a little bit on global supply chains. Rcep actually critically supports integrating ASEAN into the global supply chain and the global economy. It's truly a catalyst for a stronger and a much more resilient supply chain development for the region. Now, this is especially important as businesses continue, as you know, to recover from the COVID pandemic, and most of us are wanting to grow investments into our region. In this regard, the Rcep provides a single set of rules and procedures for assessing preferential tariffs across the region. Now, for anyone who is redesigning supply chain, who is redesigning global supply chains for themselves and their organizations or their partners, this is going to be extremely valuable. Now, the awareness of raising campaigns and the importance of dissemination of information to business sectors is going to be quite critical at the future stage, current stage. Now, this is going to be important, especially for SMEs. I think it's very important that in order for us to ensure that SMEs are able to enjoy a high degree of utilization of the Rcep and the private sector is able to benefit at the maximum level, we need to ensure that we raise this awareness. Now, this is why the ASEAN Secretariat, we are partnering with the East Asia Business Council in convening this series of webinars on Rcep. I want to thank East Asia Business Council for your deep support. The ASEAN Secretariat will continue to engage our private sector stakeholders to make sure they understand the opportunities on how to avail the opportunities and benefits of Rcep. I'm also pleased to share that come the third quarter of this year, the Secretariat will be ready to roll out an online tariff calculator initiative that will bring real-time updated information on not only the Rcep but all other regional and global tariffs for all our ASEAN businesses. Again, this is going to empower the SMEs to be able to get timely information, latest information, and updates of not only the existing FTAs, but also the forthcoming Rcep agreement. Finally, I believe that Rcep has the potential to grow beyond the regional level by its ability on extending and assessing the benefits of the Rcep agreement to all qualifying non-Rcep based companies. Now, this is why whenever I meet many, when I go for talks or when I engage foreign companies that come from non-Rcep based companies, they are very curious about the Rcep agreement. And I think it's very clear. I think one thing very clear is that Rcep has the potential to expand the benefits not only to the benefit of the current members in terms of market size, but it also has the ability to extend these benefits to non-Rcep based companies. And I think this is going to be extremely useful, especially to those non-Rcep based companies that are closely linked to ASEAN and our ASEAN members, and closely linked to the global supply chains that are in our region. Now, the fact is Rcep is very outward looking, and the rules actually today facilitate non-Rcep based companies to be able to then invest in Rcep participating countries and to benefit from the trade rules, including the preferential tariffs. distinguished speakers and panelists, ladies and gentlemen, to ensure that Rcep lives up to its potential as a new regional trading architecture that's comprehensive, inclusive, accessible, and outward-looking, we would need to collaborate with all stakeholders, such as the Asian Development Bank, the business councils, the think tanks in our region. All of them have to come together. Now, since Rcep is a living agreement, if parties want to make it a credible platform towards a new trading architecture, the Rcep actually provides a lot of flexible instruments to allow us to adjust in order to respond to and to address to challenges ahead that may be confronted as we are beginning to implement the agreement. Now, that's the hope that I'm hoping to give everyone, that we have lots of scope for us to work together and to engage one another and to be able to deal with some of the challenges that we're going to come during implementation. It's not going to be easy. It's a complex agreement, but definitely there's a deep scope and ability for us. Mechanisms are there for us to sit and sort out the challenges ahead. Now, with this, I would truly like to extend a fruitful discussion to all of you over the next 2 days. There's going to be extremely interesting panelists and speakers for over the next 2 days, and I congratulate the organizers once again for bringing the fraternity together to discuss and to bring about deeper awareness on the implementation of the Rcep. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. We truly appreciate very insightful speeches by the two distinguished speakers. Well, this morning we launched the report on Rcep, and this again signifies the ADB's interest and commitment to helping and supporting the Rcep members in developing Asia and Pacific to process the domestic structural reforms and follow the implementation in scheduled time. The Rcep, as everyone already mentioned in the speeches, presents a strong initiative driven by ASEAN members, but including the beyond the Rcep 15 members toward stronger rule-based trade and economic partnerships. This will help the region to promote the regional cooperation and also the trade integration in the time when we need the boost from the trade and regional integration for strong economic recovery and job creation in the region. I'm very happy to invite our colleagues who are also authors of this report presented in the morning. Ms. Pramila Krivalli, who is an economist in the Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Department of the ADB. And also Sanchita Bastas, who is also an economist at the Regional Cooperation and Integration Division in ADB's Research Department. They have both contributed to this report launched this morning on the web, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, Rcep, a new paradigm in Asia's trading architecture. I would like to invite both of them to give a short presentation and key findings from the report.
Thank you, Sonia. Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon, depending on where are you currently based at this moment. Pramila and I will take you through a few slides about Rcep and our findings from a freshly published report on the Rcep agreement. The report is publicly available on ADB website. I think it is there in the chat box also. The link has been copy pasted there. You may download this report for free. So So why this RCEP? And for this, I would like to take you back a bit in history to understand how RCEP came into being. And why am I saying this? Why I need a couple of minutes to share with you this thing? Because in the next today and tomorrow, we are going to hear many things about RCEP. Some may say RCEP is a milestone. It is going to make substantial change in the regional architecture. There will be some discussion on, yes, there are many gaps in RCEP and we may not see an immediate benefit from the agreement. So to bring all these discussion together, I thought a brief background on why RCEP came in picture today and how this RCEP or say ASEAN, they conduct the regional integration in Southeast Asia and beyond. So if we see ASEAN came into being in late 1960s to manage the political conflicts surrounding it. And at that time, ASEAN only had 5 members, and later Brunei joined the organization in mid-1980s. Around the same time, ASEAN started thinking of economic cooperation, mainly to bring some tangible benefits, which are useful for peace and prosperity. And it is an important thing to mark here that the beginning of ASEAN was not for purely economic reasons. And say from mid-80s, ASEAN was pursuing, say, economic cooperation to serve both economic and strategic imperatives. And this twin goal of ASEAN economic cooperation is still valid today when we are discussing RCEP. So it is serving both objectives, and RCEP implementation is that's why more important, because that is where it increases the trade agreements credibility. So ASEAN economic cooperation got more serious in early 1990s when the countries, they decided to ASEAN free trade area. And by mid-1990s, ASEAN came up with different cooperation ideas like ASEAN Free Framework Agreement on Services, ASEAN investment areas, covering other aspects of regional cooperation. At the same time, ASEAN also observed new members joining the organization, which created new problems like the economic development, levels of economic development among these countries, and the way these countries were managing their economic and trade policies. And around the same time, this is in the 90s, what we observed that there were some changes happening in the global economy. And PRC joined WTO and was regularly referred to as Factory of Asia. Regional value chains and GVCs were fast emerging. With the small countries of Southeast Asia, they were contributing in several of the sectors like textiles, automobile, toys. India, on the other side, was also growing very fast in the services sector. So, and the countries in Southeast and East Asia, they suffered a loss from the 97-98 crisis. And why am I sharing these key incidents in the past is because that regional integration in ASEAN was not happening just in vacuum. There were some developments in the global economy, and there is some ambition at the domestic economy, that is to be more competitive in the face of India and China, that they decided to form this ASEAN cooperation agenda that took it more seriously. So in this situation, in the entire decade of 90s, Southeast Asian countries, they revisited this regional cooperation agenda and decided to form the ASEAN community in 2003, which was covering 3 pillars like political security, economics, and socio-cultural. And the idea of economic cooperation this time is to show that the region of Southeast Asia provides an alternative destination for trade and investment other than PRC and India. It was a lot more comprehensive in nature compared to the piecemeal approach that we observed in the 1990s. And it was offering an economies of scale for the investors and the businesses. Around the same time, ASEAN as a region also decided to sign ASEAN +1 FTAs to highlight that the region follows an open trade architecture process. Almost all of these +1 FTAs, they came into effect in 2010, but there were associated problems like they were of different nature and they were having different values to the private sector, which we heard like earlier discussion also, that ASEAN was, all these initiatives was creating the noodle bowl effect from with the different FTAs. By the time the ASEAN plus one FTAs came into effect, like around 2009 to 2010, there were discussion of new trading architecture in the region, that is ASEAN plus 3 and ASEAN plus 6. And these architecture were present in other domains of cooperation. Like we all know, ASEAN plus 3 was working for the financial sector cooperation since the 97-98 crisis. ASEAN plus 6 cooperation was working under the East Asia Summit. But none of these were predominantly talking about economic integration. And at the same time, TPP was the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which at that time was led by US, was greatly discussed in the region. And that included only 4 of the ASEAN members. So given these new ideas that's emerging in the region, ASEAN decided to have its own trading architecture, which is more inclusive in nature, like you heard from the DSG of ASEAN Secretariat, which is more accommodating in nature to individual countries' requirements. So the other areas were often seen as threatening ASEAN centrality. This is a term, you will hear it in our reports and the discussion also, which means that ASEAN wants to continue to be in the driving seat of regional cooperation architecture. And ASEAN centrality is recognized by all bigger economies in the region. So Rcep was conceptualized in 2012, and it was mainly formed to address the noodle bowl effect from the multiple FTAs and mitigate the challenges that the businesses were facing with these multiple FTAs and create new ecosystem for the businesses to operate. So from the beginning, Rcep's objective was to attain a comprehensive and mutually beneficial economic partnership agreement. But at the same time, the early Rcep framework agreement was also saying it wants to take into account the differing levels of development among participating members. So if you are following 2 objectives that are very different in nature, it was very difficult to come up with one agreement that will solve all economic problems of the region. So what do we know about Rcep now? So Rcep is in effect earlier this year, and none of us here today are expecting that implementation will be easy. We observe the difficulties in negotiations that started from the beginning because of the dynamics of 3 participating members. That's between ASEAN members, ASEAN and FTA partners, and the 6 FTA partners. And many of these challenges came because the countries are at different levels of economic development. They have different market structure, and they have different interest in negotiating the trade agreement. Yes, there was the flexibility clause that's built into the Rcep framework, and which were expected to break the deadlock in the negotiation. It also meant that it would limit the change of greater liberalization. And by this, I mean the observers in the region from the beginning knew that Rcep is not something grand change in every aspect for the trade policy architecture in the region. There will be compromises. It will be a welcome path for many businesses, but it will not solve all problems immediately. So ASEAN cooperation document tells us like what this Rcep tells us, that it tells us that what the kind of domestic reforms the individual countries need to attract investment and to engage in trade. But it's each country's capacity to understand and measures and identify the budget for implementation, because the key characteristics of ASEAN is not that implementation is a national subject. It's not responsibility of the ASEAN as an organization or say ASEAN Secretariat. So what forces countries to implement in the region? So the monitoring role of the ASEAN Secretariat and the publication of status reports from time to time forces countries to implement. Also, as countries and have strategic and economic rationale intertwined, implementation becomes crucial. I'll quickly say you about this report. Our report is a qualitative assessment about the agreement. It covers chapter-wise overview, scope of the chapter, analysis, and analyzes commitments across Rcep and the other agreements in the region. The report is divided into 6 parts and 19 chapters, and the broad 6 parts are the traditional trade in goods, trade in services, movement of people, and then there are cross-cutting issues, conclusions, and way forward. So our main conclusion is that while working on the report is Rcep at current juncture has gaps. There are areas such as intellectual property, competition policy, e-commerce, where it is much more advanced in terms of regional rule making. But there are areas that needs further work to enhance usefulness of the agreement. These are mostly in the traditional areas of trade agreements. I'll stop here. For the rest of the slides, I will pass it to my colleague, Pramila.
Thank you, Sanchita. So I'll be very brief because I think the time is already up. So I will just talk mainly on the key findings of the report. And obviously they are not exhaustive, again, because of the time constraint, but also they are organized here on screen based on the discussions we're going to have later today and the next hours and tomorrow. So as mentioned, we have reviewed the whole agreements and identified challenges, some opportunities, made policy recommendations. So I cannot report all of these right now, but overall, let me start with trading goods, rules of origin, and trade facilitation. So the discussion that will take place in the first session of this conference. The challenges mostly you will see, it's a preview of the discussions here, will lie mostly on the long tariff phasing down and the complexity of it, some limited provisions on the limited cumulation provisions and tariff differentials, which are actually very challenging, while these provisions are extremely beneficial, as mentioned by Mrs. Wittberg in her intervention. Some issues with certification practices and also the fact that SPS provisions do not provide W2 plus provisions, and some issue with implementation of the trade facilitation agreement and coordination. Now, it has been already mentioned that here in Rcep, the opportunities lie most importantly on the built-in agenda. And in these areas of trade facilitation, trading goods, rules of origin, this is one of the major opportunities we identified. So as mentioned by our chief economist, it's not the time to relax efforts, but we can further improve the agreements, work on it together to make sure it delivers. And on trading services, let me move quickly, and investments. Here I report only few. The challenges would be, for example, on the limited application of the MFN clause, and which means that where we do expect simplifications, we would still have regulatory heterogeneity we need to address. And on investments, one on the most discussed area is the absence of investor-state dispute settlement, ISDS. But that said, we also in this report identified many opportunities and benefits, such as the negative list approaches that has been adopted in services, that will be adopted progressively in services, or that has been adopted upon entry into force in investments. We identified also new market access opportunities in a wide range of services areas. And also we identified in investments some trade-related intelligence plus provisions. And this is quite new and groundbreaking findings that we will further discuss in the next sessions. So and then tomorrow we'll have a session on cross-cutting issues in e-commerce, digital economy, intellectual property. So again, there are many issues to be discussed. Here I just want to provide some few highlights from the report. So for example, we identified that in IP, we really have a quantum leap in comparison with ASEAN FTAs because it goes further than the TRIPS agreements with even new fields like genetic resources, traditional knowledge, even folklore is included. So it's quite new. On e-commerce, commitments go beyond those in FTAs between our sub-countries and the ASEAN agreements. On e-commerce, we have provisions on data flow, data localizations that are less stringent. So, of course, with reservation and limitation due to exceptions, but still we have improvement. And finally, in competitions, the fact that we do have a chapter on competition is per se also already an improvement. So let me just quickly conclude with policy recommendations. overall, the report identifies the need for further research and capacity building on raising the attractiveness for Rcep to the private sector, because we identify that in many areas the value added of Rcep over existing agreements, as it has been mentioned in the opening statement by our chief economist, needs to be, improved to make sure that we provide the proper incentives for the private sector to use the agreements. As we know, in the region, utilization rates have been relatively low, and we want this not to happen for Rcep. We want the private sector to benefit from it. And so this research could be, like, for example, on building databases on tariff commitments, making it available for the private sector to use it. It can be policy research and certification, also roadmap on SPS activities that does not exist as of today, and so on and so forth. I think it cannot cover all of the areas, but a lot of research and capacity building will be needed. Importantly, we believe that we also need to conduct research at the country level. Country-specific research, capacity building, and financial assistance will be needed, especially also to take into account the different members' status, level of development, and priorities, and supporting domestic reforms. If you think of the trade facilitation commitments, in the Rcep agreements, you have different calendars of implementation, so different priorities, and so we need this country-specific assistance. Some priority areas you see on screen: e-commerce and intellectual property, best practices on SMEs. So it's not only in traded goods, but over the whole agreements. Another policy recommendation, as mentioned, is to expand the coverage and deepen the commitments toward greater liberalizations. So to say, raising the level of ambition of the agreement. And for that, leveraging the built-in provisions is quite important, but not only, because there are no built-in agenda for each chapter. So we can use those provisions, but we also recommend in this report some institution to build or establish some institutional mechanism to bring forward the agenda. And the monitoring and implementation is a key, because in any agreements, it's not, even if we sign it, we implement it, we need to make sure it's implemented properly. So we recommend that we find a way to monitor the implementation, to monitor how it's being used by the private sector. It can be utilization rates, but this would apply only in trading goods. So I also invite here the audience to think of, and the panelists and speakers to think of how to monitor Rcep in the future beyond trading goods, to make sure that we achieve greater liberalization and regional cooperation in the future. I look forward to the discussion, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Sanchita and Pramila. Well, we have three distinguished panelists to discuss the implementation challenges as mentioned by Pramila and Sanchita. Well, first, let me invite His Excellency Sim Sukeng, who is currently the Secretary of the State of the Ministry of Commerce in Cambodia. He began his government career at the Ministry of Commerce in mid-1998. He served at the Ministry of Commerce management level since 2003, initially as the Deputy Head of Division, and then as Deputy Director of Department of Intellectual Property, followed by the role as Acting Director of the Department of International Cooperation in 2012. He was appointed as the Director of Department of Intellectual Property and became the President of the Secretariat of National Committee for Intellectual Property Rights of Cambodia. In May 2016, he was also appointed as the Director General for International Trade, and then further appointed as Undersecretary of State of the Ministry of Commerce in November. Since June 2020, he's been appointed as a Secretary of State. He has been the chief negotiator for regional and bilateral FTAs. He used to be the SEOM lead for Cambodia, handling trade-related affairs under the framework of ASEAN and ASEAN partners. So let me invite Mr. Sim Sukeng first.
Thank you so much. And first of all, let me thank the ADB for organizing this very important conference. I'm pleased to participate in this conference. Let me share some of the implementation from Cambodian view. As you may see that for Cambodian, the implementation already start. The first CO certificate of origin issue and the good already trading from the 1st February 2022, and now we have more and more applying for the certificate of origin. May I quick show you on our system that we are doing now. Even this is not the best, but at least the basic system that we are open for online. So everybody who are producing a user or manufacturer in Cambodian, they can apply certificate origin in online and also payment online as shown in this slide. So this is to make them more better, starting easy. I can say it's not the best, but we still want to improve more. So why I'm pleased to today and learn from others as well. Let me quick out as some of the early speakers already mentioned. There are some challenge on tariff difference and accumulation. So how to deal with that? So you are right. There are a little bit challenge, but also have a common rule. This is another good sign. And later on, when they are coming, some of the exporter also asking our officer which one is more, and we start to training our officer as well to guide them step by step. We are unable to provide immediately, but at least we're starting already on that. And starting from this month, this week on, we will go to training for the trainer, and also as well as go to specific group of the exporter who wish to export under Rcep as well. Cambodian in that you may see that this is our website. I just for the purpose, because I see the general audience here, they may can wish to have a look on that. It's moc.gov.kh also have the operation certificate there, and also some guidelines all are there. And soon we will ask some support if we are able to have tariff calculator there, how to doing. We may improve that more and more. And as DHG of ASEAN mentioned that we looking forward to work with ASEAN Secretariat and other Living partners to upgrade our system as well. As I mentioned earlier, this is not the best, but at least moving step by step. And we also have a team in the department to stand ready to advise for some who wish to understand more on the export to the other country. So why I mentioned earlier, we're going to train more and more officers to provide all this service. Let me share some about the implementation and utilization, as some may question not only in this the participant in this conference this time. I believe that some are also mentioned, also talking. If FTA were so benefit, why some domestic firm is still hesitate to use them, and or maybe useless, but it's not fully used. So why? The utilization is very important. I also happy to see the ADB working on that, and some of the speaker in UNTAD also doing that. The utilization rate is very important. So as some already mentioned about the overlap FTA, we can say spaghetti or rice noodle or anything effect. It is right, but Rcep is also among that to make it more modern. I believe on Rcep is the not only combined, as DHG is mentioned, is also make something more better. We cannot compare it to be the number one or the best, but at least to make it something more interesting, more attractive. So why the conference, I regard the conference ADB is very good to more and more public awareness, to let the other more understanding, especially more research. So later on when they publishing, so they can give more insight, so the other may trust and may use more and more on Rcep. And the key challenge for them may rule origin. So we have to unlock the rule of origin on that one as well. So why we training, and I may show next slide how to deal with this as well. Training more and more officers who are able to advise and on the rule of origin. Don't make it too difficult for them, to make it easy and simple. Just tell them 1 or 2 steps, they are able to get the certificate. This is the most important. My colleague here, they may hear from me and they will try their best to do so. This is our looking forward to doing that. And you may see the big SME and the big larger firm, the multinational corporation, they have different interests and their ability also different. The command line and cost for some large firm is maybe okay, but some SME may be big challenge because some small money also big for them as well because they are still SME. So why we have to unlock and how to help SME as well, especially already Cambodia is the LDC and as some speaker already mentioned, there are good the standalone chapter on the economic cooperation. This is the main purpose to help Cambodian able to get more benefit from narrow the economic gap between the Rcep country as well, and especially the SME. And we have we can say over 95, some statistics maybe so even 98% or 99% in Cambodian business is SME. So this is another thing that we need to focus on them. And at the same time, the SME in Cambodian, the last study, over 50% is women as well. So this is another more and more interesting. And we help SME, not just only help SME, but they also help to ensure the gender equity as well. So this is another sim to help to make Rcep is modern ahead as well. The last point is in here is centralization. So the government department and office, especially I can say under Ministry of Commerce, my minister tried reform a lot. So we are able to shorten also the time to issue the certificate of origin. At the same time, in Cambodian, we already have a single window, we call national single window. In here, I put the website as well. It means that NSW is mean national single window.gov.kh. We are jointly between Ministry of Commerce and Custom and other relevant working together there to make it more easy. And the priority and action for us, especially I mentioned earlier, SME is the key or backbone for our economy, and big firm also very important. This is the target that we attract the big firm multinational company come in, and later on they can even able to share, also give us to some our business community here to learn from them, to get some from them. For us as the government office, so we have to train and also facilitate to help SME. The training is very key important because they don't know, and already, and we have to to adjust, modernize the way of training as well. We cannot call them for a whole day training. We may need to train them only maybe half hour, something, or half day maximum to let them understand and quick get back. For them, because the business people is time is money. Second point is just want to make utilization that able to get most is to make it simple, faster, and less combined cost. This is very important. So not only Cambodian doing alone, but also country as a whole have to help, have to support each other to ensure that it also is simple, that able to utilize. The strength is very important to very clear among our country of our country. Another technology is also important, digital, paperless trading. As I mentioned earlier, soon we will have the declaration of origin by approved exporter. This is already spelled out in the agreement. And we also experience that for Cambodian, we export to EU now, we also starting using this one as well, because if you want to export to EU, we have to use this. So we are learning from this, we may able to work and how to improve our system under the Rcep agreement as well to make it smoothly. And at the same time, when we are doing on technology, this is another thing that we have to ensure on the data flow, cybersecurity, and how we are moving for digital economy. This is another key important. I almost end my slide to ensure I'm on time. Do all what I just say is sufficient enough? The answer is not. We need more. And how to ensure that Cambodian exporter, as I mentioned, the major is SME, still can benefit even from the financial of this one, and how to deal when we issue the CO already, but it may be denied by other country. This is another important. But the Rcep is also good that they already assign, all the country must assign the contact point or focal point to deal with the CO or other. This is another good sign. I believe that they can smoothly communicate and able to solve all the issues facing by business as well. Another point is monitoring and the previous shipment go to Rcep country and collect all and analyze the utilization rate. Why I mentioned earlier, utilization rate is very important. They show everything on that. For some FTA that we did, the early speaker mentioned Australia is also another good sign. We can see this is another thing that able to utilize from the FTA. So if FTA without utilization is nothing, so we have to find out all that one. And later on, continue to monitor other area on the service and investment. So you may see that for Cambodian as a LDC, mostly we're starting with the trading good. We are pushing for the good able to export, but later on, how our people from Cambodian able to invest in other service, or how we able to support and take benefit from the service. The last one is a very challenge, can say challenge, allocation resource to support not only the firm, but also the public sector. Ministry of Commerce alone cannot make the Rcep more benefit to Cambodian. We need to working with other ministry or department, especially the custom or other, how we are able to go together. It is now we are set up the task force that are comprise many ministry to how to moving and take advantage of Rcep. I'm going to my last slide. Besides that, we also need the strongly support. So why I'm happy to come to any ADB conference. ADB maybe can be another big source for us to funding us, or maybe financial support us as well to make the public awareness. Let me start. You may see that some say also is still not high ambition, but at this present time it's able good ambition enough, but it's not enough. We have to make more, we have to target more high ambition, and how we able to attract more business or investor come to invest in Cambodia in a selected sector or area that we wish to generate our economic growth. As you may see the difference among the three developed LDC, developing and developed country in Rcep. So we have to target clearly. And I mentioned earlier why ADB can involve a lot on the first thing is research on economic law and negotiation area. An area we may be focused on utilization, RO and transition, and digital trade. You may see that digital trade is growing very strong. The research that we're able to get, if ADB able to support us, it will be good to see how we able to direct and publicize and also give them to use more. And also create a best practice for future negotiation. You may heard that Cambodian is not finished with this also. We continue after also with bilateral FTA and continue another bilateral FTA and maybe join another ASEAN +1 FTA or other more and more. So this we need a strong team and also need capacity building to ensure all of this as well. So ADB may be another source to support us. The second point of dissemination information is very important. After we research study, we have to give all the information to the public to understand, and advisory service, we have to support them all the time. We cannot tell them one time and let us disappear. So what next, what they can ask from us. Capacity building for the national and also can go to the provincial level. We cannot just only at the national, at the capital city. We have to go directly to the province who are potential for export. The last point is technical assistance and financial assistance. It is also another key. Maybe ADB can consider this as well. I may end up here, and also thank you so much. And I hope that the Rcep can share our Cambodian vision in 2050 to become the high-income country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Sinsuken. I'm going to now invite Professor Fukunari Kimura, who has been also Chief Economist in Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, based in Jakarta in Indonesia since 2008. He is also professor at the Faculty of Economics in Keio University in Tokyo, Japan since 2000. He has been showing a lot of interest and then published extensively in international trade and then development economics, and he's been active in academic and semi-academic setting, writing about production networks, international cooperation, economic integration, digital economy in East Asia. So Professor Fukunari, can you keep your presentation to 7 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you, Xin-Yang. Allow me to share the slide. Okay. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to be a part of this very important event. I thank ADB for kindly inviting me. I think this time ADB is completing a very important report. This is a legal text study of Rcep. I think that's a very important starting point for all of us to utilize Rcep progressively. I'd like to congratulate Pramila and Sanchita in particular for the completion of the report. In my short comment, I'd like to convey a key message like this. Rcep is a significant achievement. We have many good aspects in Rcep, and also Rcep has a good potential for utilizing effectively for the regional development. And it is comprehensive in coverage, but actually incomplete in many aspects. So I think it's very important that Rcep should be living and evolving. So ASEAN way is the way to make agreements to be living and evolving. We really have to follow the ASEAN way to utilize this stepping stone. And so ASEAN way must be applied in a progressive manner. That's a key message that I'd like to make in this short talk. Right. Signing and going into effect are not the final goal. Certainly, negotiators are getting tired to some extent by concluding the agreement, actually. But this time, the following up is very, very important. So the Rcep is actually designed as an evolving agreement in the ASEAN way. One issue is a bunch of homework. Some it's a built-in agenda in the text, and also it's listing up some issues for future negotiations in the text, and also side letters. So, for example, services should be moved from a positive list approach to negative list approach, and also we can find special and differential treatments for developing countries here and there. So these are built-in agenda, and also we have a bunch of issues for future negotiations. And also, in addition to that, we have many aspects to be upgraded. For example, tariffs, particularly on the side of China, Japan, and Korea, still tariff cuts are very incomplete. And also NTMs, we have many things to do. And also services and investment, still we have many things to do again for liberalization and also facilitation, and also in international rules too. So CPTPP is a reference for further liberalization and international rulemaking. Of course, we don't have to accept all items in CPTPP. We have to investigate one by one, but the CPTPP is still a sort of reference point that Rcep should achieve in the future. So we have to look at that. And actually in Rcep, we have a built-in monitoring and upgrading mechanism. We have annual ministerial meeting, joint committee, and 4 committees under that, and also the secretariat. So we have to utilize this facility. And also a general review in 5 years is also stated explicitly. So we have to make a serious review and upgrade the agreement at that timing. And also expansion of membership. This is another issue that we have to think of from now on. Say Hong Kong, East Timor, India, and possibly other South Asian countries will be a sort of candidate. And now we have a very serious geopolitical tensions, probably country by country, how strongly they feel this kind of pressure coming from geopolitical tensions right now. So middle powers in between superpowers actually cannot control 100% geopolitical tensions, unfortunately. So we are having a sort of pressure of control trade and also control the investment. under the name of national security, and also in addition to that, right now, human rights issues too. So that kind of logic is very strong. We cannot really push back 100% by economic logic over there. So we would have some situation having a sort of coexistence of controlled trade and free trade to some extent, at least partially. So from the viewpoint of ASEAN, for example, if ASEAN can take advantage of positive trade diversion effects or positive investment diversion effects, that's okay. Don't be shy to do that. That's good for the world. But eventually, the compliance cost for controlled trade and controlled investment is coming to everybody, not only for multinationals, but local firms in ASEAN too. So from the viewpoint of the economy, the borderline between the controlled trade and the free trade should be set as clearly as possible. But that kind of trade-off thinking is completely lacking in the logic of national security and human rights issues. So that's the issue that we really have to struggle with from now on. So I think the institutional setting of Rcep must be utilized for reducing policy risks and also defending the rule-based trading regime. We have to live with some part of controlled trade, but at the same time, we have to defend on the rule-based trading regime portion as free as possible. And also, once we have some policy risks, we have to take care of that in Rcep. So I think the non-ASEAN members' commitments are the key. Rcep is designed in the ASEAN way, so ASEAN knows how to do that. But many homeworks is actually on the CJK side. So starting from further liberalization, rulemaking, and also cooperation and capacity building. CJK's responsibility together with Australia and New Zealand is very heavy, I think. So how strongly the non-ASEAN members can keep their commitments to ASEAN way is the key for the success of Rcep. On the last page, time to time, I'm writing on Rcep, and also my research institute's area is doing a big study on Rcep too. Hopefully that we would have the continuous collaboration with ADB for this very important event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fuku. Well, let me invite our colleague, ADB colleague, Alfredo. Now, Alfredo Perdiguero is the Director of Regional Cooperation Operation Coordination Division in ADB's Southeast Asia Department. He has been working on Southeast Asia for more than 2 decades now and has a broad exposure, deep knowledge, and extensive work experience at ADB's on regional cooperation integration issues in the ASEAN and Brunei, Darussalam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, East ASEAN Growth Area called BIMPIAGA, and the Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand Growth Triangle, IMTGT, and the Greater Mekong Subregion, GMS. He also acts as the administrator of the ASEAN Infrastructure Fund, the largest initiative of ASEAN in the history, based on the member countries' funding contributions. So, Alfredo, can you keep your the initial presentation to 5 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you can see my presentation. I will just to emphasize some points that have been raised already by several of the speakers. I mean, I think clearly Rcep is a good agreement. It's an agreement that is very much welcome, I think, not only by the countries in the region, but at a time in which globalization is under threat. I think having achieved such an agreement as Rcep is something that I think all countries must be congratulating on. It is an agreement that we believe is going to benefit all member countries. Clearly is going to benefit countries that didn't have FTAs among themselves between Korea, China, and Japan. That's very obvious. But we also believe, we're a development organization, ADB, that this will also benefit to some of the smaller countries that, despite of the fact that they already have FTAs with others, this open a whole range of new possibilities by bringing together 15 countries. Of course, as other speakers mentioned, I think is quite important to ensure that the companies are going to utilize actually these agreements, and there's a lot of work still that needs to be done in this regard. Let me mention three main areas in which we think there could be great benefits. The enhancing market access. There is clear benefits over and above the existing FTAs. But however, what is even more interesting in Rcep is that there are provisions already that allowed this to deepen and widen these commitments. On tariff commitments, for example, Article 2.5 of the agreement will allow this possibility, and also possible sectoral initiatives also for faster tariff liberalization. So I think this is an agreement that needs to continue evolving somehow, and we see still a lot of possibilities. The second area is the need to simplify the trade rules. There is already a lot of good provisions and that had allowed simplification of rules under Rcep and harmonization of rules, but we still see that there is a scope for further work in these areas. In the case of the rules of origin, on accumulation, for example, of rules of origin, there is still probably lots of possible new work that could be done to simplify these rules of origin, and also to ensure wider convergence. There's very different commitments here by different countries with other countries, and this the secret of the rules of origin is if you keep them really really simple and easy to understand and to apply. Another area also, simplification of rules, will be also on investment. The connections between investment and trade are incredibly important, and of course the use of negative list is something that is promoted under Rcep. But there's still even more work to do there. We need to ensure that these negative lists are really not very long, and that the countries continue really working on them. There is also a lot of issues have been mentioned on issues behind the borders. I will not tackle on all of them, but they're from non-tariff barriers to the use of digital technologies in trade. And also many of the issues that have been mentioned on investment, on public procurement, on intellectual property rights, and this is something in which the agreement is not incredibly deep, but I think it opens also great opportunities for the region and for the countries. My second and last point is on the implementation. I mean, on how can ADB help? There are many areas in which actually we could help. We definitely could work with the Secretariat, the Rcep Secretariat, once this is established, in sharing knowledge. And I think this conference today, of course, is one of these of the possible actions that ADB can work. We could work with you, with all the member countries, really in this in enhancing the knowledge and all the options and possibilities for the Rcep agreement. We also can work on working with certain countries, if they wish to do so, to improve their domestic policies and regulations. For example, the area of trade facilitation is an area in which we have been working already for quite some time with some countries. Countries such as Cambodia or Laos PDR could maybe willing to work with ADB in deepening this work. And also we are the Secretariat and supporting many sub-regional agreements in the Greater Mekong sub-region, BMPAGA, IMTGT. A lot of discussion is ongoing there on how could we use these agreements to also help in implementing the Rcep. Last but not least, in terms of capacity building, we have lots of capacity building programs and we have learned a lot on how to do capacity building, both for government officials, but also for the private sector in terms of utilization. We could work with member countries either collectively or bilaterally to really keep implementing, improving capacities, both of government officials, like I think Excellency Sokeng mentioned. This is still very much needed bilaterally and multilaterally. And sometimes it's good to have a capacity building program in which countries learn from each other, not only from the experts, but really learn from each other. What are the practical ways in which they are and the practical challenges that they're having in implementing this agreement. So in summary, in ADB, I think definitely from the perspective of the Southeast Asia department, and we are very much willing to keep working with you. I think this is an agreement with great potential, but it's also an agreement where much work needs to be done to ensure that it's successful. And at the end of the day, that actually will benefit the people in the region. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alfredo. Well, we don't really have much time left, but let me have maybe just a follow-up questions for each. First, Fuku, somebody actually raised this question about the role of Japan. What will be the future role of Japan in ASEAN, especially in now amid the changes in the trade supply chain and the post-COVID economic recovery, and is Rcep contributing or changing the way that Asia has been driving recovery through export and then also the supply chain expansion?
Thank you. So I changed my hat to Japanese economist now. So one thing, sort of an economic relationship between Japan and ASEAN, still manufacturing production networks are very important. Actually, through the COVID-19, so we have some analysis that Japanese production networks were so really robust and resilient compared with other types of networks, actually. So I think still this is one important channel between Japan and ASEAN. But in the future, so probably we have to go beyond. Japan has a huge accumulation of R&D stocks, doing a sort of incremental innovation, but a bit behind using a sort of disruptive innovation, using a digital economy. So we have to have some sort of a good merge between incremental innovation and disruptive innovation. In ASEAN, I think this is something beyond manufacturing, but the various kinds of services. I think that could be a very important thing. So Rcep is really trying to keep the rule-based trading regime in this region. I think the role is very important. So I talked about the geopolitical tensions. Now in Japan, all discussion is on geopolitical tensions, actually. Nobody's talking about free trade. I mean, this is really, really dangerous situation in the viewpoint of Japan, I think. But we really have to defend on that very active private economic activities. And still, companies are working very actively in this region. So we really have to think much of that. So Rcep is a sort of basis for making a sort of really vigorous economy in this region.
Thank you. Well, there has been also a question from the floor about the Rcep's role in strengthening MSME in Vietnam. I do feel that Cambodia faces a similar opportunities and challenges. So the Excellency Sokeng, what are the main challenges you see in Cambodia to somehow leverage the Rcep to strengthen the MSMEs?
Thank you for the question. This is very challenging. First, I can say some of SME on Cambodian, even some we can say I meet personally, some even illiterate. They don't know how to read or write. but they are really willing on doing business, and they also want to go. When they heard we are talking about Rcep, about free trade, they are very exciting, but they don't know how to continue to utilize this one. So this is another face very practical challenging. So why, as I mentioned earlier, we have to train our officer able to tell them 1 or 2 steps. And another challenge, you may see that all this one we use English, and also very mentioned very clearly we use English language. So we have to double work in our country, translate into Khmer and support the SME in Khmer language. And sometimes translation, our officer even limited capacity itself. So why I oftenly repeat again and again in the few minutes ago that as ADB, whatever that you're able to support, please let's discuss and able to support. This is the challenging. When ADB able to help us, we can unlock for some this one for SME. And the knowledge on rural region is not simple, I can say. You may see ADB acknowledge that rule. So why we want to make it very simple and very easy to target specifically on specific group. We cannot serve all in one time, but from step by step, we can plan by month or by year to which that we wish to going on. So I may say like that to give another chance for other question. Thank you.
Thank you. Alfredo, there has been also some call for the, this Rcep secretariat, as you even mentioned. But there are widening like the diversity and then gaps in the development challenges across ASEAN plus these 5 economies in Rcep that may also present difficulties for implementation. What do you see as a role of Rcep secretariat, or if if ADB or other multilateral institutions are called in to support? What are the economic areas where this support can be directed?
Well, I think it would be very important really to have a secretariat. I think there are provisions in the agreement already that, of course, are calling for the establishment of a Rcep secretariat. And as there are many areas that this secretariat could do, and I think monitoring the implementation of the agreement is definitely one. But also, as we said, there is still a lot of work to be done, and a lot of possibilities to keep expanding really the agreement. So I think having a secretariat that will be somehow supporting the countries to move this agenda will be extremely important. We believe that there should be a secretariat. They should be established as soon as possible, and of course, another area would be to really trying to help and support the countries. Maybe countries that are a little bit less ready for implementing this agreement. And capacity building programs for these countries it will be also very important. I think without the secretariat, it will be maybe complicated to really move forward this agreement at a higher speed. So we really encourage the countries, and from ADB perspective, if this secretariat is established, we definitely are willing to work with the secretariat to work on all these multiple areas.
Thank you. Well, for all the speakers and the panelists, I would like to pose one final question, and then please use it as a wrap up. Each can hopefully do it in 1 or 2 minutes. So the Rcep has presented really enormous opportunities, but we also noted many challenges in terms of implementation, and then different areas of human capital development, the digitalization, infrastructure connectivity. There are a number of areas that the Rcep may not have really comprehensive sort of the guidelines or solutions to suggest, but these are the areas where the economies need to bring closer and also close the gap across, so that the potential of Rcep can be maximized for growth, inclusive growth. So to do so, what will be your key takeaway within Rcep framework? May I go first from the Excellency Suk-ken.
Thank you, Sayong. This is a very important. You may see that also start with, I can say this is a very unique that we're able to have a three group on the table negotiate at the same time. We experience when we accession to WTO, we are the first LDC, but it is another different challenging, but this time is very good for Cambodian that able just start from the beginning on. We are talking together with them, and we also show them the challenge that LDC are facing in Rcep. And in the Rcep member negotiating party is they are generous enough to have the special and different treatment, even furthermore for the LDC country. And after that, you may see some speaker mention about the building agenda. This building agenda is very give us a bridging time, some time to digest and to make a plan ahead. Now, after negotiation, immediately we already take all of this one, this framework to build up step by step. Even we cannot make it happen overnight, but we already have this one. So I still regard this is very important that the building agenda is a very good opportunity for us and also good opportunity for others that wish to join and to participate in Rcep, as it mentioned by the professor, that we should be open for the other, that even LDC or not LDC are coming in Rcep. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Fuku, have a final thought?
Yeah, thank you. I think we have to take advantage of having the institutional setting of Rcep. That's extremely important. Annual ministerial meeting, I think we have to utilize that in order to keep the rule-based trading regime as far as possible. We have various kinds of uncertainties coming from geopolitical tensions. So we cannot solve everything, but at least we have to raise questions and also issues over there and talk. In order to do that, I think a joint committee, 4 committees, and also the function of secretariat, those are very important. So that's a starting point, I think.
Thank you. Alfredo, can ADB help to narrow the gaps?
Yes, definitely ADB can. I think Rcep has been good news at a time in which we are not hearing so many good news. And I think as Professor Kimura just mentioned, political issues are now, and political tensions all over across the world is what people are focusing now. And then suddenly we had this agreement. This was good news for the region, I think good news for the world. It's an agreement that, of course, could have gone farther, deeper, but I think this is the Asian way. And the Asian way, I think they need to guarantee and be sure that this will truly benefit people. It's not just only about reaching an agreement which is incredibly deep. It's also ensuring that the countries, especially some of the weaker countries, actually will also benefit. And I think they have been extremely careful. This is why it took 10 years maybe to negotiate. And that's not a bad thing. I think it's an agreement that's why they are where they are now, because they have negotiated very carefully. I think this should continue again with a secretariat, and you have definitely full support from ADB. I think this conference today and what will happen in the next today and tomorrow will be just the beginning of maybe a dialogue and the support from ADB to this whole process.
Thank you. Well, please keep all of your cameras on for the panelists for the opening, including the keynote speakers. So we'll have the group photo. And I would like to announce the launch of the report, the the Rcep, a new paradigm in Asia's trading architecture. The link is available on the chat box actually, and then this is accessible publicly, and I hope that everyone enjoy reading.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Sorry that we can't really entertain all the questions from the floor. There have been a few floors, and then I've tried to merge those questions for the panelists to answer. But this will conclude the first session. Thank you.